Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thanks again for stopping by. Of course, I watched the World Cup and stayed up extremely late last night, and I love this advertisement by Adidas, and I'll put up a link for it. It really is very, very good indeed. And I also took a photograph of the sunset on my TV and of Christ the Redeemer looking over the football ground. And I'll also put up another photograph of the trophy overlooking the field of play as the game gets underway. And of course, it was absolute delirium for Goetze and his teammates. Goetze took a beautiful goal, actually. But as I said at half-time, I tweeted that, how it has remained 0-0 is a mystery because there were so many chances at both ends. I read Howard French's book, China's Second Continent, over the weekend, and let me give you a few items that caught my attention. Page 4, Beijing has achieved this in part by engineering a kind of modern-day barter system in which developing countries pay for new railroads, highways and airports through the guaranteed long-term supply of hydrocarbons or minerals. Africa has received 1 million or so of Chinese newcomers in the space of a mere decade, during which time they have rapidly penetrated every conceivable walk of life. History teaches us, I like this, that very often reality is more meaningfully shaped by the deeds of countless smaller actors, most of them for all intents and purposes anonymous. Page 7, mid-century will stand out as a sort of twin horizon for Africa when population growth peaks and when known oil and mineral reserves are exhausted in many countries. This is interesting. They told me they were natives of Fujian, a mountainous, hard-to-farm and hence historically poor coastal province in southeastern China that has generated a disproportionate number of Chinese migrants overseas during the last 2 generations. That was an interesting nuance I did not know. Page 31, time and again Chinese told me they did not fully realize how oppressive things were at home until after they had left. Living in Africa, they said, it felt as if a lid had been removed from a pressure cooker. Now they could breathe. Page 64, Michael Satter, who then I think was an opposition candidate. The Chinese are scattering all over the world, but there is no such thing as Chinese investment. As such, what we're seeing are Chinese parastatals and government interests, and they are corrupting our leaders. Page 123, the Chinese were very quick to establish ties, and right away they offered to build us the Palais du Peuple, National Assembly building. Ever since then, practically every African leader, whatever his ideological orientation, has gotten a palace of some sort from the Chinese. Page 137, the Chinese work in a very peculiar manner. They prefer to deal directly with the president and to make a spectacular gesture, and that is that. They don't go for any public discussion. Page 143, the poky old Bamako that I'd known for years had become the fastest growing city in Africa and the 6th fastest in the world. It's all euphemism, and that's the problem with the state. It's full of bullshit. Everyone knows that if there'd been none of this revolutionary nonsense. Instead, we got leaders who are obsessed with revolution. Human beings want to make money. Men want to enjoy beautiful women all the time. The perpetual revolution crap we had to endure was antisocial, unhuman. Page 217, Chinese business has captured our elites. Page 249, some young people at our hotel had invited us to a place called Benny's Entertainment Park in the nearby town of Ongwediva to celebrate New Year's Eve, and then he later describes it as the African equivalent of a video night in Kathmandu. And finally, Jamie and I spent 3 days driving to Johannesburg at a leisurely pace, sleeping on the Namibian-Botswana border one night under one of the starriest skies I've ever seen. We have ventured out into some of the most sparsely inhabited terrain in all of Africa, and for most of the drive there were only tiny towns flung many miles apart, with only ostriches, baboons, and the occasional aardvark to capture our attention. I like this tweet from Stephen_H. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that there was in me an invincible summer. Albert Camus. We've put together a little bit of footage from the 15th annual Safaricom Lewa Wildlife Tusk Marathon. I'll put up that photograph of the 2 male rhinos, and unfortunately we learned that 4 rhinos were poached in the last week. Traders are asking for about $65,000 per kilogram of rhino horn. I'll put up a selfie I took of the oldest competitor, 84 years old. Political reflections. Israel carries out first ground operation of the Gaza crisis. You can see the photograph. Bowen from the BBC talks of some rockets heading for Israel from Gaza. And that took me back to Thomas Pynchon. A screaming comes across the sky. It has happened before, but there is nothing to compare it to now. Gravity's Rainbow, Thomas Pynchon, 1974. It is too late. The evacuation still proceeds, but it's all theatre. There are no lights inside the cars, no light anywhere. Above him lift girders old as Iron Queen, and glass somewhere far above that would let the light of day through, but it's night. He's afraid of the way the glass will fall soon. It will be a spectacle, the fall of a crystal palace, but coming down in total blackout, without one glint of light, only great, invisible crashing. Inside the carriage, which is built on several levels, he sits in velveteen darkness with nothing to smoke, feeling metal nearer and further rub and connect, steam escaping in puffs, a vibration in the carriage's frame, a poising and uneasiness. All the others pressed in around, feeble ones, second sheep, all out of luck and time, drunks, old veterans, still in shock from ordnance, 20 years obsolete, hustlers in city clothes, derelicts, exhausted women with more children than it seems could belong to anyone, stacked about among the rest of the things to be carried out to salvation. Only the nearer faces are visible at all, and at that only as half-silvered images in a viewfinder, green-stained VIP faces remembered behind bulletproof windows, speeding through the city. It's a superb, very prescient book. Is Gravity's Rainbow, well worth reading. The link is on the website. And on that note of a screaming coming across the sky, I was thinking of Gaza, obviously, but I was also thinking of a photograph I took of Nairobi when seemingly a screaming came across my photograph. US intelligence officials want ISIL, or IS fighters to keep tweeting. Radical Islamists in Iraq using social media to spread fear and propaganda in a way no terrorist group has done before. Fighters from the Islamic State have shared Instagram pictures of gory executions, YouTube videos showing a beheading, tweeting, "This is our ball. It's made of skin, World Cup." Seemingly without break, their Twitter account spews a mixture of carnage and preaching peppered with weird jokes and gruesome taunts. American officials want them to keep it up. An employee with a major social media company told Mashable that US intelligence officials approached the company and asked the ISIL accounts not to be taken down, despite the often bloody and threatening content. US intelligence prefers for these accounts to stay up rather than come down, the employee said, on condition that he and his company not be named. These guys are so busy promoting themselves online, you'd think they were Justin Bieber, said Clint Watts. Certainly, the group appears to have a coordinated social media strategy, according to experts on intelligence gathering in the Middle East. Um, as Kalev Litaru, a fellow at Georgetown University, put it, ISIL is the first group to use social media as an actual weapon of war. Spreading fear and propaganda, of course, is nothing new. The terror of Genghis Khan's campaign across Mongolia in the 12th century was a language of swords. Heads on spikes communicated a clear message of pitilessness that helped crush opponents' spirits. Much later, Al-Qaeda would found Inspire magazine to spread propaganda, and its offshoot in Iraq would turn to televised beheading to signal their willingness to commit unspeakably brutal acts. An influx of often young and tech-savvy volunteers from the West has helped the group translate its message, not just linguistically, but technologically and culturally through the appropriation of memes, for example, to a Western audience. Yet there is something paradoxical about a group that wants to return everyone to the Dark Ages, yet uses high-tech American companies to disseminate that message. And in fact, if you study the social media messages that come out of the Al-Shabaab and out of you'll find a very interesting and westernized tone in those messages. An image grab taken from a video released on July 5, 2014 by Al Furqan Media shows the alleged Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi preaching during Friday prayer at a mosque in Mosul. And then I found this photograph again from the Smashable article of Omar al-Shishani, a Chechen jihadist standing next to the ISIL spokesman. And one other image I liked was of John Kerry meeting with the King of Saudi Arabia. And most people, me included, think that the is a Saudi Arabian intelligence asset. Currency markets: euro slightly above 136, 136.20. Dollar index 80.22. Japanese yen 101.40. Touched 101.07 on July 10, which was the strongest since May 21. Swissy 0.8926, the pound 171.16, Aussie just below 94 at 0.9396, India rupee 59.969, South Korean 110.1950, Rial 222.06, Egyptian pound 715.35, and the rand is at 1072.96. The dollar has fallen 0.7% this year, according to Bloomberg. Yen has gained 3.6%. Euro is down 1.8%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar. It's at 80.22. Yellen will deliver her semi-annual monetary policy testimony to the Senate Banking Committee tomorrow and to the House Committee on Financial Services the next day. Euro dollar just above 136. Draghi will testify today to the European Parliament's Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. Gold 1333.425. Traded as high as 1338.70 on July 11th, touched 1,345 on July the 10th, which was the highest price since March 19, and we're not too far away from that. It's up 11% this year on the back of rising geopolitical tensions around the world. But I think at this point it looks expensive to me. Geopolitical concerns perked up to the top of the agenda. This is Edward Meyer. We expect to see a little more upside action this week, with festering geopolitical hotspots providing support. Silver has had a 6-week weekly advance. Platinum, 4th week of gains. Palladium, not too far off for the February 2001 high. Crude oil down below $100, very oversold. Futures were little change in London after falling 3.6%, the most since January last week. The IEA is saying supply risks in the Middle East and North Africa, not least in Iraq and Libya, remain extraordinarily high. Interesting piece on Beyond Bricks about how emerging market local dynamos eat the multinationals' lunch. Why do they matter? Well, put simply, their strategies, customized business models, digital and mobile solutions, flexible and fast growth are paying off. Rapidly scaling up their operations to take advantage of the rising tide of local economies, thriving amid uncertainty and turmoil, as well as complex regulatory environments, to create market positions that competitors will have difficulty duplicating. At the same time, they're creating world-class capabilities in areas such as talent management, innovation, and product development. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, Portugal's bank crisis is a European contagion, said the Fiscal Times, and I added, and Angola. For instance, the bank has invested in Angola, setting up a subsidiary known as Banco Esperito Santo Angola, BESA. BESA has relied on Banco Esperito Santo for its funding, with loans in Angola amounting to 220% of deposits. Bad loans have exploded in Angola in recent years, rising by 84% from 2010 to 2013. BESA's assets include 6 billion euros worth of loans payable, and Banco Esperito Santo has a 55% stake in the bank. The government of Angola, a former Portuguese colony, has given the bank a personal guarantee amounting to 70% of the bank's loans. There is doubt about whether the bank can retain solvency in the event of a crisis. Companies' bond businesses in Portugal have tumbled in recent weeks from 100.2 cents on the euro last month to 10.1 cents today. That's a bit of a concern. The Republic of Senegal has mandated Citigroup, SocGen, and Standard Chartered to organize a series of fixed income investor meetings in the United States and Europe, commencing on Tuesday, July 15. And obviously, given the performance of the Eurobond markets, it is a very attractive place to issue. South African oil shares up 10.604% in 2014. Dollar rand back at 10.7292, so towards the lower end of the trading range. Egyptian pound around the 715 level we've been hanging around for quite some time. The Egyptian stock market was down 0.66% yesterday. It's up 23.872% this year. The Nigerian oil shares up 3.63667% this year, not far off the 2008 high. Nigerian police say they uncovered a plot to bomb Abuja's transport network. Credible intelligence indicates that terrorists have perfected a plot to carry out attacks on the Abuja transport sector intended to cause panic among Abuja residents and visitors. Shekau, Abubakar Shekau, who's the head of the Boko Haram, said a bomb went off in Lagos. I ordered the bomber who went and detonated it. You said it was an ordinary fire, but it was me in that fire. Well, you can hide it from people, but you can't hide it from Allah, Shekau said. Of course, I take you back to the 20th of April, when I referenced Boko Haram's Abu Bakr Shekau taunting President Goodluck Jonathan with the comment, I am in your city. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 10.2654% in 2014. Kenya, moving on to Kenya, a rally, not a revolt, says the Africa Confidential, for the youthful crowd, mostly from the scores of informal settlements that ring Nairobi's upmarket districts. These were not the main issues. They had expected a radical call to arms and street agitation. They, rather than the Jubilee government, may pose the greater headache for Odinga in the future, and I think they're correct. Pekatoni and anyone but Al-Shabaab vanished as the presidential figure who originally sought to unite and reassure shocked Kenyans after Westgate. Instead, Kenyatta has stepped right into the fray of politicians' acrimonious statements, as well as hate speech spread by social media and text messages. Already, even before the Pekatoni attacks, loyalists of Kenyatta's ruling Jubilee coalition sought to portray the earlier attacks as targeting Kikuyu. This in turn has fed a perception that the attacks were in fact ethnically motivated violence perpetrated by sympathizers of the Odinga-headed opposition court. The fact that no one claimed responsibility left open the possibility that Al-Shabaab was not to blame. The Daily Nation columnist Macharia Gaito wrote, by the time the Pekatoni attack came about, it was almost as if to confirm the prevailing narrative about a domestic anti-Kikuyu plot. President Kenyatta's statement now takes that out of the murky realm of Jubilee social media activism and soapbox political rhetoric and elevates it to the official government position on a key national security issue. Fast forward 2 weeks to the Gamba and Hindi attacks, and Kennedy's claim appears less a statement born from extraordinarily efficient investigative abilities by Kenya's police service and more a knee-jerk reaction to sully Jubilee's opponents. Anyone but Al-Shabaab is now responsible for the attacks. Thus, Kenya has moved in the past 2 months from suffering a series of attacks that no one claimed responsibility for, but which were thought to possibly be part of an intensifying Al-Shabaab campaign in Kenya, to a succession of massacres claimed by Al-Shabaab, but which the government and police blame on a range of political dissidents and outlawed domestic groups. And I said on the 3rd of September 2012 that my concern remains that what appear like uncorrelated spikes and paroxysms of violence conflate, become more broad-based and amplified. 19th of May, I wrote that the dashboard is blinking amber. That link's on the website. Kenya travel warning extended by the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office has warned Britons to avoid travelling to areas of the Kenyan coast after attacks by militants left at least 87 people dead. The advice warns against all but essential travel to the coastal counties of Lamu and Tana River. Warnings also remain in place for areas around the Kenya-Somali border, as well as parts of the capital, Nairobi. Meanwhile, the Kenyan government has advised its citizens not to travel through London Heathrow Airport. In a statement from the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it warned Kenyans not to travel through Heathrow due to the substantial threat of a possible attack by Al-Qaeda operatives, very much tit for tat. Requesting Kenyans advised to seek alternative travel routes to connect to the US and European countries. These include Doha, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Amsterdam, and Addis Ababa, in order to minimize the risk and avoid possible delays. Very insightful article written in the Standard on Sunday. Police unveil names behind coast killings. The Standard on Sunday can now authoritatively reveal the name of an Al-Shabaab commander who led the fighters that carried out deadly attacks in Lamu County. Intelligence reports say that Idris Kamau, a Kenyan of Kikuyu ethnicity, was the mastermind of the spate of terror attacks in Lamu that have so far claimed 87 lives. This information is contained in a report prepared by the NIS and sent to police stations in the coast region on June 4. The alert also indicated that a former KDF soldier, Abu Jamal, is in charge of a cell of the Al-Shabaab fighters in Mombasa, said to be planning more attacks in the region. The report said Kamau and his group of fighters are currently hiding in the depths of the vast Boni forest, where they are believed to have set up an operations camp. The alert said the attackers were planning to carry out more raids in Makowe and Kipini in Lamu County, Ijara, Garsen, Malindi, and Kilifi County on unspecified dates. The brief report, which has been seen by the Standard, further warned that the planned attack in Malindi is to be a massive one, involving about 150 fighters divided into 3 groups. For nearly 1 month now, the attackers have melted into the forest to evade capture, much to the chagrin of security officials, one of whom likened them to ghosts. How is it possible that they can move so quickly and without us noticing? How is it possible that we have not killed one of their men, despite us shooting at them? I know this might sound absurd coming from me, but I think they could be using some magic potion, he said. The attackers have mostly struck whenever it rained, limiting the movement of police vehicles in the soggy clay soil to a minimum. Moving on, the value of mobile money transactions grew 30.1% year-on-year to 544 billion shillings in the first quarter of 2014. The Kenya shilling is at 87.743. The Nairobi all-share is plus 10.589% this year and 1.6401% below a record high set on July the 2nd. The NSE 20 is down 0.4872% in 2014. The CMA finally have a quorum. The Treasury Secretary, Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, announced the appointment of Karen Candy and Laila Macharia to the tribunal on Friday, giving it the quorum required to hear and determine cases. Fusion Capital has bought a stake in Nairobi's evening paper. They've bought 40% for 125 million which roughly values the media company at $313 million. The future for print media, say these folks, is free news, and the future for media as a whole is digital, web, and MS services. Companies are looking for an efficient, targeted way to promote their products, and that is what Extra will offer. So that is an interesting thing. Of course, on Friday, Kenya's freshly minted $1.5 billion 10-year Eurobond reached a record low yield of 6.195%. Buyers bought the bond at a price of 100, and the current price is just shy of 105. Therefore, they made an extremely tidy profit. Commentary is on Rich Wrap-Ups if you care to have a look at it. Once again, I thank you for stopping by to listen to my daily podcast.